I think it's doing a countdown. I don't think it's going to start until exactly noon.
Oh, okay. Not hearing anything either?
Mm-mm.
All right, well.
But like, see how they're saying it's just pausing. Until
Yeah.
I'll reload this just in case. I think it's just not going to start until noon.
There's an error loading your app. The app did not load because there appears to be something wrong with it. Hang on. Going to be waiting a few more minutes, but I just want to, hello, testing. Hello, testing again. Just wanted to confirm to see if the audio is working. Yeah, but there's like a couple second delay. If someone can put into the chat if you can hear me, just to confirm. Great, thank you. Great, so we'll just give it a few more minutes before getting started. Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining. We're just going to give another minute or two before beginning. See if a few more folks can join on. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Ben Silverman. I'm with the City of Boston's Environment Department. I'm the Climate Buildings Program Manager in charge of the BERDO program, the Building Energy Reporting and Disclosure Ordinance. Today we are our first of 4 different webinars where we're going to be covering the energy action and assessment requirement, going over the specifics of the requirement and how buildings can help meet it, as well as answer some of your questions. Each of these webinars will be formatted and the content will be identical, so don't feel obliged that you have to go to all. We just want to make sure as many people can go to one as possible. Just to go over how this is going to be done, I will be talking for about 20-ish minutes or so, going through the requirement, as well as showing you the key web pages and forms in which we're looking for folks to be filling out for this, during which time you are welcome to put in any comments or questions into the YouTube live stream chat box, and we'll be covering them in detail once I'm done. Also during that time, my colleague Stacia will be commenting and answering some of your questions, just in case you have anything very specific you want answered. But we will also be going through them live on air when we're done. Anyway, just again, for those joining in, this is the Energy Action Assessment Overview webinar put out by the City of Boston's Environment Department. So just to begin, what are we talking about? In 2013, the City of Boston enacted the Building Energy Reporting and Disclosure Ordinance, sometimes called BERDO. This ordinance, as many of you may know, requires larger buildings in Boston. At this point, all buildings above 35,000 square feet or 35 residential units or larger parcels with multiple buildings on them, to report their energy and water usage to the city on an annual basis. This has been going on since 2014. I'm sure many of you have been doing this and are kind of well informed on that whole process. Also within the ordinance, though, is that after 5 years, buildings covered by it must perform some form of energy assessment or action. This requirement is sort of designed to spur significant building energy efficiency improvement and lower Boston's greenhouse gas emissions, while helping buildings cut costs. If for those who don't know, but in Boston, 75% of greenhouse gas emissions originate in buildings, of which about 50% of those emissions come just from the BERDO buildings, the 2,200 largest buildings in Boston. So, seeing increased energy efficiency and lowered emissions is pinnacly important for achieving the city's carbon-free by 2050 climate commitment. The action and assessment requirement has 3 main pathways, and each pathway has its own specific number of different options within it. So you have the energy action pathway. This is something that we are most encouraging folks to be looking at. This is the pathway that will help you lower your energy costs while helping us lower citywide emissions. But the idea is a building will complete energy efficiency or renewable energy projects that reduce buildings' total energy consumption or greenhouse gas emissions by 15% over 5 years. Now, that's definitely a very big task, but it's very important for achieving the city's overall goals. But we do acknowledge that that's not the easiest thing, especially this late in the game, for folks to accomplish. So probably the second most common compliance pathway is energy assessments. A building owner can complete an energy audit by a professional qualified engineer. The audit will provide building owners with a list of what's called energy conservation measures to improve your building's energy use and greenhouse gas emissions. And the requirement is simply that takes place anytime in the prior 5 years. So if you did an audit on your own in 2015 or 2016, that's perfectly acceptable. Or 2014, that's all perfectly acceptable. But we do want to just see verification that audit take place. And the last pathway is that those buildings that have already just shown that they are highly efficient by one means or another can essentially be exempted from this requirement. Those primary pathways are, Energy Star certification, LEED certification, and otherwise zero net energy certified. So things to remember is that buildings only need to complete the requirements of one pathway in order to comply. You don't need to do this for multiple pathways. But whichever pathway you choose, we are asking that you show verification with that pathway by May 15th of the year due year. So this is the same date in which the normal BERDO energy reportings is due, and it's just when we also want to see the energy action assessment compliance documents in. But you can request a 6-month extension. We're trying to be as flexible as possible in giving folks as much time as needed in case you still need some work done or still need to get, do an energy assessment or provide the necessary documentation. So the things to remember here when it's due is that it's due 5 years after a building is first required to be covered by BERDO. Many of you might not know that offhand, so we've set up a number of lists in which folks can check to confirm when that date is. But for those buildings that first were basically part of the first cohort of buildings in 2014 that were non-residential buildings above 50,000 square feet, the due date is 2019. So we're talking about May 15th, 2019 at the moment. And just to summarize, the first year BERDO was 2014, that's 50,000 square feet and above for non-residential. 2015 or the May 15th due date for energy action assessments in 2020, that's 50,000 square feet or 50 units or larger for residential, and ratchets down 2021, we're talking about 35,000 square feet for non-residential, and 2022 is 35,000 or 35 units and larger, or to be more precise, between 35,000 square feet and 50,000 square, with that smaller threshold cohort. And this is sort of our overview of what this cycle looks like, where you can see when you first started reporting for BERDO in 2014, 15, 16, et cetera, when the energy action or EAA due date is required, as well as what we're calling the baseline of when your energy performance improvement is starting to be measured by, so 5 years prior to that last due date. And you can also see that this is an ongoing requirement. This is not just a one-off thing. This is, we are aiming for continuous improvement in Boston's building stock. Yeah. So, before you begin, we want to remind folks that the BERDO has these two portions, and that buildings are expected to be compliant with both. So if you, the ongoing energy reporting at each year, that's still required, and we do, and it does help you show compliance with the energy action assessment requirements. So please make sure that you have submitted reports for all the years that you were required to. If you have missed a year, or if you found that the data errors and things that you wish to fix, then resubmitting data for prior years is perfectly allowable, and we can assist you in doing that. So let's begin with just the highly efficient pathway. There are three main things that we're looking for, or different cohorts of what has been determined highly efficient. One is Angie Star certification, and the EPA Angie Star system, which is what you do, portfolio manager is what you do your regular BERDO reporting through, has a certification component in which highly efficient buildings within certain building types who get an Angie Star score of 75 or larger get a certification through Angie Star. We're looking for those buildings that have achieved that certification, have shown that their point scores are above 75 for 3 out of the prior 5 years. Now, we may be open to a certain amount of variance on this depending on situations, but that's sort of the baseline requirement. Also, it's something to note, Angie Star certification is different than normal Angie Star reporting. In talking with folks, we found that some folks get confused by this. Angie Star reporting through Portfolio Manager is just what you do normally for BERDO, but there are certain buildings that, that have shown that they are, highly efficient relative to others of the type that can get certified. And so that's what we're referring to when we're talking about certification, not just normal BERDO reporting. The second is LEED. The United States Green Building Council, USGBC, has a well-recognized green building certification system called LEED, or Leadership in Energy, Environment, and Design. There's a number of different grades, from LEED certifiable, LEED silver, LEED gold, and LEED platinum. If a building is LEED certified and silver in any of the various options, so new construction, operations and maintenance, and so forth, and this is important, and has a minimum of 15 points in the energy and atmosphere rating. So that's the specific category related to energy efficiency. That is a compliance pathway for this requirement. The last is probably the most flexible requirement is around zero net energy or carbon certification. There are a number of different entities out there, from Passive House, Living Buildings Challenge, that are providing certification for a building that's zero net energy or carbon, i.e. it either generates or otherwise offsets 100% of its annual energy consumption on-site or through off-site renewable energy purchasing. So, but if you're not certified but can otherwise provide documentation that shows that that is indeed the case, that's also a compliance pathway. Just as a reminder that only very specific buildings can receive Energy Star scores. So office buildings can, but many multifamily buildings can't, or same thing for universities. So those that can still comply with, that can't get an Energy Star scores, can still comply with the highly efficient buildings pathway if they have demonstrated they are highly efficient compared to those in the sector locally or nationally. This is another area where we're opening up for a certain amount of variance, but we do want to provide substantial evidence that you are indeed a building that has done a lot of work, that is highly efficient relative to your building type, and that building type itself is not capable of getting an Energy Star score. So this is an opportunity for the variance request form, which we'll come back to a little bit later. So the energy action pathway. This is something that the city is most encouraging folks to pursue, but we also do understand that it may be, especially with as little time left between now and May, it may not be the most viable option for a lot of folks, but it could very likely be a viable option for folks in the next cycle. So what we're looking for is, there's multiple ways of measuring this, but a 15% improvement in performance measured by different methods. So if you have lowered your total energy consumption by 15%, if you lowered your site energy use intensity by 15%, if you lowered your total greenhouse gas emissions by 15%, and same thing with greenhouse gas intensity. Similarly, if you are a building that's eligible to get an Energy Star score, and you saw a 15-point increase in that score over the prior 5 years. Energy Star scores measure performance from 0 to 100, with 100 as the most efficient, 0 is the least efficient, and 50 is essentially just the average building. Something to note about that, as many folks have may know, is that Energy Star scores also periodically update. This is just, that the Environmental Protection Agency wants the Energy Star score to represent the average performing building in the nation. And as the nationwide building stock has improved in energy efficiency, so it becomes harder to get high Energy Star scores. So some folks may find that their Energy Star scores is lower right now, but that it should be noted that you can resubmit your Energy Star data to assist us. This is something we could probably go into a little bit more in detail, but the idea is we're looking for relative improvement from 5 years ago. And if because of how the Energy Star score works, you can find out relative to these new measurements where your building fell 5 years ago, 4 years ago, even if your overall score decreased. So let's say before the changes, you went from a 50 to a 75. That would be a compliance pathway. But now your current score is a 60. but because of how Angie Soft Portfolio Manager calculates your score, you'll be able to know that you'll be able to see by that new measurement, what your score was 5 years ago. So that 50 you had probably was reduced to 35 or 40. So there's still a compliance pathway there. I understand that might sound a little confusing, and it very much is. So this is something we could definitely help folks walk through on a one-to-one basis if it comes up as a concern for you. Other things to note is that back to the action pathway more directly, the idea is that we're looking for action. We're looking for specific measures that are helping buildings improve their performance, lower their emissions, all that good stuff. And that can take. We're very, very open to a lot of different options to this. Obviously, there's energy efficiency measures, and insulation, windows, improved heating and cooling systems, all that great stuff. On-site renewable energy installation, that's a great option, go for it. Connection to district steam or cogen, there are energy efficiency improvements that can go from that. Inclusion in the institutional-wide master plan. Now, this is something very specific for the universities, the hospitals, and the larger building owners in Boston. But if you have 20, 30, 100 different buildings, and you have a joint energy action reduction plan or energy plan for that institution, and you've seen a decrease in overall greenhouse gas emissions, you can aggregate your whole portfolio for compliance with this pathway. That's an allowable method. And lastly, we have off-site generated renewable electricity purchases. Now, that can take the form of just simply going through your utility vendors and purchasing more renewable electricity, but it can also take the form of renewable energy credits or RECs. The one thing to note about RECs is that we're going by the industry. We're going by the industry standards of Green E certified, as well as the Mass Class 1 and Class 2 RECs. But we also, you need to maintain the RECs. So if you're purchasing, or if you've invested in a big solar farm out in Western Mass or wherever, you still need to maintain, and that's going to be your compliance pathway in terms of lowering your overall emissions. You need to maintain those RECs. This is just sort of the industry standard for this work. And I do imagine that there's going to be some questions about that, so we're very happy to go more into it. The next is the energy assessment pathway. So this is essentially, we're looking for ASHRAE level 2 audits. These are, as discussed, energy audits are, you bring in a trained professional energy engineer, they work through your building, they provide you a list of energy conservation measures that they recommend is the best fit for your building. And in doing so, you can act upon them and help lower your overall emissions. These are really the first step in a building taking a serious step to reducing its overall emissions and energy costs. For buildings above 50,000 square feet, the minimum is ASHRAE level 2. For buildings below 50,000 square feet, the ASHRAE level 1 would be allowed. The thing to note, though, is that we are open to alternative energy audits or assessments, that they are allowed. ASHRAE level 1, level 2 is sort of the industry standard, but we do know that the industry is providing a lot of other alternative energy assessments that provide you with basically a lot of the same kind of information, and we very much encourage that. At the moment, there are no, but for an energy audit or assessment to be allowed, it does still need to be approved by the city, specifically the Air Pollution Control Commission. At the moment, we haven't had any submissions yet, or at least last time I checked on Friday, for new alternative energy assessments to be included in this requirement, but we are very open to, and if you have, whatever it may be, if you have something that is an energy assessment that with a trained professional that provides the building owner a list of energy conservation measures that they can that are actionable and they can act upon with clear payback periods and energy savings, then that's what we're looking for. And we very much encourage folks to apply for alternative energy assessments as well. And once those are approved, we make the list fully public so everyone has access to the same list. Just to reiterate that the assessment still needs to be done by some form of energy professional. Basically, we're looking at the industry standards of ASHRAE, building engineers, the Performance Institute Multifamily Building Analysis, the Association of Energy Engineers, Certified Energy Manager, Certified Energy Auditor. These are all relatively standard, though we are aware that there might be folks with other credentials of a similar quality that might want to be included. So that's something that we're open to hearing more about from you all if you have a professional engineer or professional building energy person who has something slightly different in terms of accreditation. But the main point is that we want these audits and we want all this documentation to be approved by a third-party professional, or alternatively potentially a first party. So this could also be an employee of yours. Exemptions. So these are largely very extreme cases. If your building's being demolished, if it's been vacant completely for the last 5 years, or for whatever reason your building shouldn't have been on BERDO list to begin with, those are the clear exemptions, and those are all pretty straightforward. Extensions: if your building is if you're in certain amount of financial duress for any reason, we can provide up to a year extension. Otherwise, we are allowing for a general across-the-board request for an extension of 6 months. That, as talked about before, for some of you, this may be very big news for you. This is a large ask. We're trying to be as flexible as possible while still meeting the requirement as is, but we are open to as long as a 6-month extension for those who need it. So back to the variance request form. We have this philosophy of leaving no building behind. We want to make sure that every building in Boston has a viable and pathway for compliance with this requirement. And there's a lot of variance and a lot of diversity in the building stock in Boston. And creating a simple one-size-fits-all approach was never going to cut it. But also creating 1,000 different pathways is also probably untenable. So the compromise we came to is we have these 3 main pathways, each of which has a bunch of smaller, more specific options. But if there are buildings that just for one or more reasons due to the nature, such as that they're highly efficient, but not capable of getting Energy Star certified, if they have done a series of really intense and high standard energy efficiency measures, but due to the nature of their operations, say you have a high energy usage laboratory, you've done some amazing work on lowering those your energy usage up to the point where you'll be entering into more difficult areas, such as affecting ventilation rates, which are covered by health and safety standards, et cetera. There's a lot of specificity to this. So we've opened up the door for a all-purpose variance request form. These are so one-off variance requests based off of your specific building characteristics. What we're looking for in those forms, and I'll be showing them shortly, is that showing that you've met the spirit of the requirements here, that the spirit of the energy action assessment requirement is ongoing energy efficiency improvement, or providing buildings the assessments and overviews and energy conservation, list of energy conservation measures, or just information they need to make those improvements in the future. That's the general philosophy we're looking for, or again, otherwise, already highly efficient by its very particular standards. If you feel like you've met that in some form over the last 5 years, but you don't fit in clearly into one of these categories as detailed, that's what we're looking for the variance request forms. It's going to be and we can, as we go into that, we can talk through what will happen in case as well, where we think that you do have a viable pathway to compliance outside of, within the current pathways. That's so the alternative here is that, if you provide us a variance request form, something unique and different, but we point out, well, there's a very clear action you could be taking with inside of the current pathways. That's going to be a lot of what the give and take on that level is going to be. But still, the philosophy here is we'll work with you to find the best compliance pathway that makes sense for your building. And thank you. Well, actually, let me continue from here. So we'll be coming back to the slide later, so you could take these down. But this is just a general BERDO webpage, the Angie Action Assessment specific webpage, and our all-purpose Angie reporting email address. So just to show you, here is the main Building Energy Reporting and Disclosure page. At the top, you scroll down, right here, there's Energy Action and Assessment Requirements. This is only about like halfway down the page. It covers the basic information, but as well as a link to the 2-page guidance document and the more detailed how-to guide, just to show you what those look like. This is just an overview of the basic requirements discussed. And this is a far more detailed step-by-step how-to document. But here, we follow this. This is the main hub for the Energy Action Assessment requirement. Along the side, you see again the how-to guide, the guidance document, some basic on what to know, resubmitting your data, our office hours, and as well as the how-to guide. Up top, you have, so if you are going for the energy action requirement, going to the energy assessment, you're going to highly efficient building exemption. Each step goes into detail what we're looking for and how to comply. Here as well. So at the bottom of each, so you make sure to review your data, and then submit an energy report. So I'll walk through this process with you. It's a simple Google form at the moment. We're working with the city to create a slightly more robust system. But for the time being, we're relying on Google Forms, just as we found that it's the most reliable for the needs that we have. In it, this includes a overview information again, as well as the places to go if you want to resubmit your BERDO data. This is this area. And in it, it's pretty straightforward. So we want your contact information, building address, which is going to say, One City Hall Plaza. We want it required. You need to know what your tax assessor parcel number is, which I don't actually know off the top of my head for City Hall, but we'll just put that. And for your BERDO reporting, what your Angie Star Portfolio Manager ID number is. Again, whatever. In this case, we're just going to do the energy assessment pathway to show you what it looks like. Each one's going to be a little different. So here we have the list as discussed of ASHRAE Level 2, ASHRAE Level 1, and as more alternative energy assessments are coming online, the list will grow. But just to show you what it looks like, let's say you have an alternative energy assessment that you wish to include in. Just another Google form. We would just want you to help provide us information, an overview of what the energy action assessment is like, name of the organization that's doing it, and some sort of letter, describing it more in detail. And from this form, we can then go through the process of getting it approved by the city for this purpose. But so let's say we had an energy assessment that was done, let's say really early. So let's say in the winter 2014, long time. but just, early enough, but it's still, within the time in which it was covered. And from there, what we're asking for as supporting documentation is you either provide the full energy audit report, which it's not necessary, that can be a big file, or you can follow this link to fill out a shorter energy conservation reporting form. So this is what it looks like. This is just all kind of fake information we filled in, but it's just type of energy conservation measure done, what specific was, LED lighting, any more details you want, and then we're looking for specific energy savings and cost savings, and then this system just sort of calculates a simple payback for it. But you fill this out. You only need to fill out those energy conservation measures that have a payback period of under 10 years. But if you could fill out it with everything that the energy audit, that the energy audit provided. Your choice, add file, I think. Yeah. Next. So, and this is just asking again the professional that did it. So I'm going to include our city's energy engineer, Adam Jacobs, qualification number 1115. And we would ask for an additional signed note just confirming from him that all this is accurate. I certify, submit. Hey, there it is. After which point, we will be reviewing them by hand just to confirm that it meets all the specific requirements. But our goal is to get back to everyone individually within 2 weeks just to confirm your compliance with this requirement. In terms of additional forms, so this is the variance request form. Same thing, Google form. We're asking for the address of the building, the parcel number, Angie Star information. We're asking for which pathway that you're more or less you're close to, or you're filling in the kind of general outline for, but just not meeting by one reason or another. Let's say you've done a lot of energy action work, but for whatever reason you're not meeting that 15% magic 15% number. Fine. So you can explain in detail why this is the case, and explain the work that you kind of completed prior to 5 years that meet that. Next, you fill it in, and we follow up with you again within 2 weeks to discuss what more we need to go through with that. Again, this is the form, and shown before, this is the energy assessments for BERDO, the alternative energy assessments. Lastly, seems like plenty of folks are already on this. This is the current complete list of all buildings covered by the energy action assessment requirement, the date, by the specific date that they need to do it by. So 2014 was the first year of BERDO, and this is due in 2019, 2015, 16, 17, and 18. Make sure to check through this list to see if your building's on it, but do note that the most reliable, the address of your building may, that you're used to may vary so much from what we have as a parcel address. So, 174 to 184 High Street, and your mailing address that you use might just be 180 High Street or something to that effect. Just be aware for those types of variances. But definitely checking it based off of the parcel number will be very helpful as well. And I think that is it for now. Let me just drink it. I think I've got a couple questions so far. So let's take a look. The first question is, if recs are available, how do you submit report in the summary? Okay, that's fair. So I only just showed one compliance one route just to save time, but We can just go the same process. So this is still the energy action assessment reporting Google form that we saw before. Just filling this in so we could go to the next one. These areas are required, just so that it helps with tracking purposes. And so this is the energy action pathway. In it, so you're going to want to indicate one, by what measure is the reduction taking place. Likely, if you're purchasing off-site RECs, it's probably reduction in overall greenhouse gas emissions, but it could be multiple that's allowed. And we got to purchase of off-site renewable. So and it states that additional documentation will be required. So we can get okay. Here it's just listing out all the specific requirements here, but really what we're looking for is proof of purchase for off-site renewable purchasing. So Green certified renewable energy certificates have been retired or otherwise kept for all required off-site renewable energy. And then we can we will confirm on the back end just to make sure the math matches up in terms of greenhouse gas emissions reductions achieved. But that's the requested third-party documentation for this, and that in each of these specific pathways asks for something different. And confirm, and there's a next step in which that you're having a an energy professional of some form just signing off to verify that this is all indeed the case. But the third-party documentation we're looking for is basically proof of purchase or proof of retirement for renewable energy credits. Hopefully that helps out. Just want to, the moment, I'm going to check to see if there's any more big questions, but that seems to be about it. I can, as we wait to see if anyone else wants to join in, I'm just going to switch over to the screen so that folks can write down the email addresses and necessary web page sites. Just so you know, we do have office hours between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. on Monday through Friday. If you call the City of Environment phone number, which you can do just right here. We are here to talk with you and help you figure this out. I'm sure there's a lot of people very worried and concerned and have a lot of questions about how they're going to comply with this. But again, to reiterate, we are, our job here is to make sure that you have a pathway for compliance. And we're happy to work with you and answer any more questions. I'll just give it another second. So I think with that, we're going to close down this webinar. I do appreciate all you taking the time to join us today. Again, this is the first of what's going to end up being 4 different webinars. The first one today. The second one is going to be on Wednesday, and the following 2 will be in 2 weeks on that's Tuesday, November 13th, and Thursday, November 15th. We're going to be emailing out recordings of this, and yeah, thank you all for joining, and please feel free to reach out whenever you can or whenever you need to, and we'll answer more questions. But thank you again, and have a good rest of your day. And also, go Red Sox.